Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education and Justice. If you have an African-American son in public school, you need this book because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African-American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately.
Tragic rendition of Hans Christian Andersen's The Emperor's New Clothes, we're all catechized to deny what our eyes see. The emperor, in fact, is naked, even as CNN applauds the splendor of his apparel. But what happens when we start to see the racial realities in their stark nakedness? What happens when they're set free for the public to witness? What happens when cracks start to form in the big lie? What we see is that America has a racial problem. And the incident with the girl on the train.
America has had a racial problem. America has had a racial problem for 400 years. When you enslave someone because of their race and make them chattel property under the law because of their race, when you say that they're 3/5 human beings because of their race, America has always had a race problem. The race problem didn't start because we can look at some very, very unfortunate and satanic deaths of white people. White life is not the only life that's valued here, sir. Black life matters too. But that doesn't matter to white Christian nationalists, the people who so-called settled this land. No, that doesn't matter. Black life doesn't matter. Give me a break. We've always had a race problem here.
Seems to be something of a breaking point. Many Americans are waking up to the lie of the civil rights era that was supposedly to usher in racial equality, but instead brought exactly the opposite. More violence against whites, more discord, more dysfunction.
Bull. The civil rights era, the civil rights movement did not bring more violence toward whites. It dismantled the violent era, the 100-year violent era of Jim Crow, where violence was visited upon blacks on a daily basis, thousands of lynchings, castrations. What is he talking about? You see, this only makes sense to low information people. This makes no sense to me because I am an educated man. I am a civil rights lawyer. I study this for a living. And all of this is rubbish. Totally.
There's something about the footage from Charlotte. There's something about watching a young white woman bleed to death on a train, black criminal hulking over her tiny frame, that seems to have unleashed millions of whites in America to finally...
But what about when blacks are hanging from trees or being beaten within an inch of their lives? What about that? What does that awaken? What about police officers shooting black men who are innocent and unarmed, including black children? What about that?
Start telling the truth about black culture and black violence.
Oh, we've already talked about white culture here, dude. That is the violent culture, white culture, that has gone around the world, settling. Good Christian whites have gone around the world, settling other people's land. You want to talk about culture for a minute?
More people are willing to say what our elites forbade us from even thinking. Blacks have a violence, rape, murder, and fatherlessness problem. Many of them, at astonishing rates, act like brutal animals.
Who's more brutal than white men? Leopold, who killed millions of blacks, maimed millions more. Hitler, who killed millions of Jewish people. Enslavers, who killed millions of people. And yet we're the most violent on the planet.
White people aren't the oppressors. When it comes to violent crimes and many other social evils, they're actually the victims. As Matt Walsh recently pointed out on his show, young black men in America are probably the most violent group of people on planet Earth.
I've shown you that that is a lie. I've shown you that that is a lie. Total. Absolute. Absolute. And unfortunately, sadly, the violence that you do see in the African American community, other African Americans are usually the victim. Yet they want to be the victim, and that's just exactly what Professor Whitehead, Andrew Whitehead, said about white Christian nationalism. A lot of victimhood. Now, I can recall when white conservatives, black conservatives, would say to black people, stop playing the victim card. Well, that's all I hear coming from white Christian nationalism. They own everything. They control everything, yet they're victims. "47 presidents, one black, yet they're victims. Control everything. Control all the wealth. Corporations, universities, yet victims."
Statistically, a white person is 30 times more likely to be killed by a black person than the other way around. In 2019, there were roughly 560,000 violent interracial incidents between blacks and whites. 470,000 of them, or 85%, were black on white violence. This, of course, is in spite of the fact, again, that white people make up almost 60% of the population and blacks just 13%.
I'm going to show you that all of that is rubbish. Just hang on.
As Walsh said, by raw numbers, there are more black interracial killers than white. That should be impossible. There are 171 million more white people in the country than blacks, and yet there are more black interracial killers. By raw numbers,
he made all that up. I don't know where that came from. That makes no sense. And so here's the truth about hate crimes. And guess where I got this information? From the FBI. Among the single bias hate crime incidents in 2019, there were 4,930 victims of race, ethnicity, ancestry-motivated hate crimes. Just under 5,000. Now, based on what he just claimed, you would think that most of those victims were white. You would be wrong. 48.5% were victims of crimes motivated by offenders' anti-black or African American bias. 48.5, almost half, 50% almost, despite us only making up 14% of the nation's population. And what about whites? 15.7% were victims of anti-white bias, despite them making up, as he said, 60% of the nation's population. Only 15.7% of those almost, 4,000 hate crimes were against white people. And they were not committed mostly by blacks. 14.1% were victims of anti-Hispanic. I want you to see how so much greater the incidence of anti-black hate crimes are. 4.4% for anti-Asian bias. And oh, by the way, there is no anti-Asian hate crime bill for you folks who have been saying that stuff for you. There is no anti-Asian hate crime bill. It doesn't exist. There was the COVID legislation that was passed. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head that mentioned Asian, but it did not create any right just for Asians. If Asians are victims of hate crime, the same law that is used to prosecute folks who commit hate crimes against everybody else is used to prosecute hate crimes against Asians. 2.7% were victims of anti-American Indian or Alaska Native bias. 2.6% anti-Arab, 0.5% of anti-Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander bias. 8% were victims of anti-other race, ethnicity, ancestry bias. 48.5% of all hate crimes in 2019 were committed against blacks. By who? Whites. FBI hate crime data for 2019 through 2023 show that white offenders committed the majority of hate crimes in America, and black people were the most targeted group. This isn't speculation. It's federal data. White offenders disproportionately attacked black victims during this period. So says the FBI. I don't know what this guy is talking about.
Young black males in particular are in order of magnitude more violent and more likely to commit crimes than any other group in the country. Black men are 5 or 6% of the population. They commit the majority of murders in the country. That makes black males in America more dangerous than perhaps any demographic in the entire country, Barn.
And I will continue to point out that yes, black men commit a disproportionate percentage of murder in this case, in this country. But why? Why? And against whom? Why? Because of the oppression that we've dealt with. If you don't think oppression affects a people, then just study the Bible. This man is a pastor. Go read the Bible to see how the Jewish people were so messed up in their heads after being enslaved 400 years. Just go study the scripture. And look to Native Americans who were relegated to reservations. Look at how they have been so terribly affected by whites coming here and taking this land from these people. And oh, by the way, Native Americans also enslaved blacks.
None. Cultural Marxism has rotted our civilization down to the timbers. And though we don't have gulags, we also don't need them. As Diana West says in her book, American Betrayal, quote, "Today turning one individual into an example seems to be all that's necessary to keep the citizenry in line," end quote. Hence the years-long lawfare waged against young white men like Kyle Rittenhouse or Daniel Penny, the New York subway hero who subdued a black passenger to prevent him from doing what happened to Irina Zarutska. Heroes are punished by our legal system, and villains like Carmelo Anthony or George Floyd receive national adulation from a liberal media apparatus. The villains are often lionized online before the blood even dries on their hands. What can be done? We do well to hearken to the words of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who wrote in his essay, Live Not by Lies, that the simple step of a courageous individual is not to take part in the lie. Let your credo be this: Let the lie come into the world. Let it even triumph, but not through me.
So he says the solution for the system giving a hands up and favoritism to black men is to start telling the truth that black men are really the most violent men on the planet. Despite the fact that when black men kill, they usually kill each other. First, seldom is it white people. And even more important are the millions of blacks that white men have killed. He just goes over that. He just bounces over that like it's nothing. Like it's nothing, like those lives don't mean a thing. But it's his second solution that is really, 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 really problematic. His first solution to whites, he's talking to whites here, tell the truth about how awful black men are, which is really fomenting violence against black men, is what that is. That's dehumanizing black men. And we do know you dehumanize a group of people, it's easy to kill them. Which is exactly his second solution. Listen.
As Solzhenitsyn said, first, we have to identify the lies we're being told. And second, we have to refuse to participate in them, no matter the cost. The starting point, as he rightly pointed out, is to identify our own personal agency in the propagation of lies. We aren't just victims here. We are responsible for our own thoughts, our own words, our own actions. So for those with the courage to act, with the courage to be hated and opposed and reviled as racists and all of their other most cherished epithets, the question is simple. Which lies do we start with? Perhaps we start with the civil rights movement, the big lie of Marxist egalitarianism that race and culture and behavior and sexuality were all social constructs, all infinitely malleable lumps of societal goo ready to be formed on the potter's wheel of globalist elites. Or the idea that all races are morally, socially, and in every way equal. We're told to be colorblind, which primarily turned out to mean ignoring the obvious traits and behaviors of different races. It meant
traits and behaviors of different races. This sounds like the racist anthropologist of the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, the 30s who said that blacks have smaller brains and criminal crime genes. Also reminds us of our sitting president saying blacks are born criminals. These are the people who are in power. And over 2 million blacks voted for him. And some of those people voted for him or didn't vote because of the pro-black imposters who told him to go out and vote for Trump. Or don't vote for old Kamala Harris is the way they would say her name, Kamala. Now look at what we got. Look at what we're dealing with now. People who despise black people, call us animals, savages, born criminals. They smiled in your face to get your votes.
Pretending like they were all equally righteous. We were told to judge men of color by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. But then we were forbidden from actually doing the former, from actually judging black men by the content of their character again and again. We were lectured by Barack Obama about how white people wrongly profile black kids in the hood, about how black parents had to have the talk with their children. As Pastor Joel Webbin recently pointed out, however, the talk that needs to happen is between white parents and their children. Don't take public transit in a majority black neighborhood.
Oh, this is such rubbish, such rubbish, such rubbish. This is not based on facts. This is not based on facts at all. I've gone through the facts. This is not based on facts. These folks are picking out some of the most heinous murderers that there are, no question. No question. And basing an entire ideology and movement on these things. This is so disingenuous. This is not the spirit of Christ. This is not the spirit of Christ. Not at all. This is not Christianity. This is completely, totally garbage.
Like Charlotte or Chicago or Atlanta. If you're driving through East St. Louis, which you shouldn't, lock your doors and get out immediately. You're likely to get stabbed to death. Yes, you should definitely recognize the color of their skin, especially if they're black men.
Look at how racist that is. When the truth of the matter is, we know who has killed the most. And it's not black men with black skin. It's white men. That's what the data says. That's what the numbers say. That's what history says. But I still want you to pay close attention to hear what his second solution is.
Is, of course, alluding to the 2012 article that led to the firing of author John Derbyshire from the National Review. The title was The Talk, the non-black version, where Derbyshire made a similar point. This bit of wrongthink cost him dearly at the time, but not because he was incorrect or even unkind or unreasonable in the article. No, he was canned for violating the blasphemy laws of gay race communism. We were told that Christian civilization was the real villain, with its hierarchy and social order and outdated moral codes.
Total garbage. Black people are the most religious Christian people in the country. What is he talking about? What is he talking about? But has he been around any blacks? What is this?
It sought to turn the so-called oppressors, white Christians, into the oppressed by legally, socially, and economically crushing them. It used the government Leviathan to do its bidding. It told this story over and over again in the press, in the classroom, and in the courtroom. Minority crimes would be excused. White crimes would be vindictively and unjustly punished.
So minority crimes excused. Is that the reason why blacks make up 14% of the population and almost 50% of the people in prison? Is that what he's talking about? See, the numbers, what he's saying is not supported by the data.
As Diana West wrote, we have become heirs to a false and hollow history, unwitting participants perpetuating and entrenching many, many lies as we take our places in a secretly subverted pageant and never know it. The church, too, has imbibed the big lie about gay race communism. Pastors proudly shout for open borders, all while changing their social media profile pictures to black squares in a show of solidarity with subversive communist groups like Black Lives Matter. Many of those pastors, like Matt Chandler, closed their churches during the pandemic, but proudly marched with BLM.
Oh, I love this part here, because they always will get around to attacking other whites who try to walk out the Bible where it says that God's kingdom and throne is based on righteousness and justice, equity. So if a white pastor dare stand up, as the scripture says, and speak up for those who can't speak for themselves, then here they come attacking them. What they used to call back in the day, in-lovers. You know what I'm saying. Here that comes.
Figureheads of denominations like Ligon Duncan in the PCA publicly apologize for decades of their own unseen racism. Church leaders have become mouthpieces for everything from pandemic lockdown enforcement to DEI propaganda. Like Chandler, many pastors passed over more qualified white pastoral applicants in favor of blacks with less qualification. Chandler proudly bragged about his church's quota-based hiring from the pulpit, a clear violation of James' warning against wicked partiality. Why? Because he was courting the approval of coastal elites. Because he was eager for their applause, eager to show the elites just how in step he really was with the egalitarian Marxist agenda. America's pastor.
Remember the elements that I gave you regarding white Christian nationalism, right? The victimhood, the conspiracy theories, the elitism, the attacks on the so-called elites, all of that is what marks white Christian nationalism.
Are nothing more than modern-day Pharisees clothed in the self-righteous garb of Marxist woke ideology. These modern-day Pharisees love to build monuments to...
And by the way, I'm woke. I'm woke. I'm woke, 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 wokety woke, 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 woke. I'm woke. I'm woke. And I'm woke in the way that we African Americans have always had to be woke. Not in woke in the way he's trying to make the term nefarious, right? No. I'm woke in the Jesus way. I'm woke in the way of being on the side of the oppressed, as Jesus identified himself in Luke chapter 4. Yeah, I'm woke like that. I'm woke like the Matthew 25:31 through 46 woke. Okay? Because our Savior was woke. I don't think this gentleman here, I don't think he would like Jesus too much if Jesus was walking this planet. I don't know. Jesus had this thing about hanging out with the sinners, with the marginalized. I don't know if they would like that. With the oppressed. I don't know. Jesus, Bible says, would go about doing good, healing all who were oppressed. I don't know that this guy would like that. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know him. But from what he's saying,
to the dead prophets, even as they zealously persecute the living ones. For example, from the pulpit, they will profess Paul's righteousness when he says this to Titus, one of the Cretans, a prophet of their own.
Now listen at how he's getting ready to just simply attack even more so black men. Keep listening. And he hasn't said the most egregious thing yet, believe it or not. But what he's about to say now, the use of scripture to completely dehumanize black people. Watch this.
Said, Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, lazy gluttons. This testimony is true. But they would crucify someone who said this. One of the blacks, a prophet of their own, said, blacks are always violent, evil beasts, lazy thieves. This testimony is true. The pulpit is supposed to be a clarion trumpet for truth, not a propaganda machine for lies. And yet, every time it expounds the virtues of egalitarian racial ideology, it perpetuates the lie. And liars, Revelation 21:8 teaches us, go to hell. Be honest. A part of you is probably uncomfortable to hear me say what I just said above.
Well, here's some truth. The millions of people that white men have murdered throughout human history will not be excused by manifest destiny or the doctrine of discovery or papal bulls. Or white Christian nationalism. Won't be excused by that. That's some truth for you right there.
Not because you think the parallel between American blacks and the Cretans of Paul's day is unjust as a lawful generalization. No, your discomfort comes from your innate cultural programming, that part of you that has been trained not to see, not to say, and never to resist the propagandist's pen. So what are the solutions to this problem? You have to begin with this.
Right here. Right here. This is indescribable, what he's about to say, from someone who's a pastor. A pastor. Listen at this.
Yes, there are no easy ones. The solution is going to require the enforcement of law and order. It will require the execution of many thousands of violent criminals. On this point, Toby Keith and Willie Nelson were right in their song, Beer for My Horses. Grandpappy told my pappy, back in my day, son, a man had to answer for the wicked that he done. Take all the rope in Texas, find a tall oak tree, round up all of them bad boys, hang them high in the street for all the people to see. Public executions are a starting point. Instead of making an example of the Daniel Pennies of the world, worse should be done to the DeCarlos Browns. What about wicked politicians, judges, the government officials who allow a man like DeCarlos Brown to be released over a dozen times back into the world with his head still attached to his shoulders? As my grandpa used to say, a lot of people need killing. The solutions are not easy, and they're not just one thing either.
You heard it for yourself. There is no Christ in that. There's no Bible support for that. That's another gospel. That's a perverted gospel. That's white supremacy theology. Those were the kinds of Christians who came here and did exactly what the founding fathers did. Anytime you got a pastor who's advocating public lynching of black men, a white pastor advocating public lynching of black men, we're in dark, 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 dark days. And I'll close with this, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, against people like this, but against principalities and powers, the rulers of darkness, spiritual wickedness, who are once again telling lies to justify the return of public lynching. I am Reverend Civil Rights Attorney Augustus Corbett. Thank you for watching this video. I wanted you to hear what you heard. And there's even more. He now talks to one of his comrades, but you got the gist of where they're coming from. And remember, over 2 million blacks voted for this, and millions of others stayed home, which enabled them to take power. I'm out.